Java with James here with Chip Ganassi at the track. Got to start off by saying happy birthday. Thank you for being here on your big day.
Big day?
Big day. Is it cool to get to celebrate your birthday in May every year?
Not every day you turn 40, you know, at the racetrack.
Wow, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it's a good thing. It's nice to celebrate every year here because my friends are all here, and it makes an extra special celebration. And when you win, it's an extra special gift.
I wasn't sure if it was one of those things where, like, you know, kids that have a birthday really close to Christmas or something, they feel kind of gypped because everyone just cares about Christmas.
Yeah.
And here, obviously, everyone cares about your birthday, but there's also this other thing going on.
Right. Yeah. Let's focus on the big show.
Okay. You're okay deferring the attention to the big show. Love it. Chip, I want to talk about your start in racing. What got you into racing? Everybody knows the empire that you've built, the success that you've had in your team, but born and raised in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, born and raised in Pittsburgh. My father was in the asphalt paving business and he paved a go-kart track. Everybody's heard this story 1,000 times, I think, but he paved a go-kart track and the guy didn't pay him for paving the go-kart track, so we had 3 go-karts in my cousin's garage, and you know, we just that started the racing bug, because we had 3 go-karts. You know, when you have one, that's a lot of fun. When you have 3 at that age, it's a major racing series.
Right.
And, you know, so, that was how we got started. And, you know, one thing led to another. It was go-karts and dirt bikes and then into cars. You know?
So how old were you when you sat in a go-kart for the first time?
Yeah, probably, I sat in one I was about 3, and the steering wheel was about this big, and I couldn't reach the pedals.
Right.
So, and you know, my next door neighbor had a go-kart too. He was about 5 or 6 years older than me, and he had a go-kart, a really fast one with a McCulloch engine, I remember, and the thing went 80 miles an hour, I remember. And and our driveways were directly across from each other. And I would stand on the street and watch for cars, and he would drive on the, you know, back and forth
between
across
driveways,
the 2 driveways. Yeah. So that just, you know, at a young age, I was, you know, salivating for motorsports. And it's just been a dream come true. You know, you never think that you'll be sitting here however many years later, and that's your vocation and your avocation at the same time.
Yeah. When you first got behind the wheel of the cart and started getting this passion for it, then did you become a fan of the sport? Did you start following it and watching racing, or were you just kind of focused on your little racing world?
Yeah, no, I was just like, you know, I was like every other kid, you know, HO cars and, you know, slot cars and what have you. And you know, in those days, you really didn't know you knew there were Indy cars, and you knew there were stock cars, and you knew there were, you know, the GT cars, and there were all different kind of models and things that you had. So you really didn't settle on one type of racing. I remember in 1963, my father came to Indianapolis for an equipment auction.
Okay.
And he came home with an 8mm film of the 1963 Indianapolis 500.
No way.
And I mean, I must have watched Parnelli win in 1963. I've watched that at least 500 times. And so I can tell you anything about that race. And what was the greatest thing was then becoming, you know, meeting Parnelli later in life. And then he was a big mentor of mine up until he passed away last year. You know, like he signed off on my driver's license here at the Speedway. You used to have a veteran sign off on your license that watched you drive. Yeah. And he was one of the guys that watched me drive and said I was okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and you know, something. It's just been an incredible storybook career. Yeah.
So, is it safe to say that, you know, your dad getting that 8mm of the 500? That's what kind of got the love for IndyCar going. Because what if that had been the 1963 Daytona 500 and you watched that 500 times? Would you be more kind of focused on a stock car career at that point?
Yeah, you never know. You know, you look back now and it's an easy connection.
Right.
But at the time, you're not thinking that at all. I mean, I also remember my mother on weekends would take us on these little trips from Pittsburgh, these little driving trips. And one time we went up to Corning, New York.
Yep.
And we took a side trip over to Watkins Glen.
Yep.
We went to the track, and we went to the Glen Motor Inn for lunch. And there were guys in there with driving suits on doing some tire testing, and it was Mario.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, like 12 years old, I met Mario Andretti. You know, and you think, well, yeah, did that have something to do with it? Well, it didn't hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
It certainly didn't hurt. And but to say that you were 12 years old and you were going to go to the Indianapolis 500, people would think you're crazy if you said that. But yeah, it's just incredible. I've just been the luckiest guy on the planet.
Was your dad a car guy?
No.
Not.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
Wait, he wasn't into racing?
No.
Not into cars?
No.
None of that?
Ironically, he and my mother, on their first date, they went to a race.
Okay.
Believe it or not, they went to a place just outside of Pittsburgh called Heidelberg Raceway.
Okay.
It was an old little, I think it was a third of a mile track.
Weird move for not a racing guy.
Right. And so just to tell you how big of racers he and my mother were,
Okay.
On their first date, they went to a race. They didn't go to another race until I was in one. So they weren't exactly.
So it didn't really,
No.
it didn't bite them the same way.
Right, no.
Okay, hold on. We got to pause for a sec because I realized that I was so excited to get the conversation started, I completely missed the whole point of the show. I'm gonna make a bold assumption here. You're a busy guy. You've probably never seen an episode of Java with James, and nor should you have. This is not a test. So the whole shtick here is, and we kind of chatted. I ran into you yesterday. We kind of chatted about this. I hate coffee.
Right.
So naturally, we would build a show around me having to drink coffee. So what we do is the guest picks their drink of choice, their morning drink of choice. I have to drink the same, and I'm sampling the entire spectrum of coffee-related drinks. So tell us what we're drinking today.
Coconut milk cappuccino.
Okay.
With a couple drops of stevia.
Okay.
Right.
Why coconut milk? This is a first for me.
I'll tell you why. Just because I'm not a big fan of regular milk.
Okay.
And
unless, it's.
Unless it's
it comes in a bottle.
Right.
Yeah, there's one kind of.
I'm a big fan of that milk.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a big fan of that milk in Winter Circle. But I like plant-based milk.
Okay.
And I was almond milk for a long time.
Right.
But then I don't like the almond milk at Starbucks. It kind of has a little burnt thing to it.
Okay.
I don't really care for. So I switched to
coconut
milk there.
Have you gone the oat milk route yet?
Yeah, but they feed oats to cows to make them fat. So I stay away from oat milk.
That is wise word. I'm gonna tell my wife that. My wife, okay. So I'm gonna take a sip of this and see kind of where this stacks up. Coconut milk cappuccino with a couple drops of stevia.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good one, I think.
Look, this Honda Hospitality here provides the best coffees in pit lane, as
yes,
you know.
They do. Yes.
So this is somewhat less offensive than some of the other ones.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Or the interview or the coffee?
Both. So I'm certainly not going to go as far as to say it's good.
You're not going to go that far.
No. I've never tasted a coffee.
This is over right now.
I've never tasted a coffee product, Chip, that I would have classified as tasting good.
Oh, really?
I would say your selection tastes far less bad than some of the other ones.
Well, maybe you should change the name of the show then to like Green Tea with Hinch.
I don't drink tea.
Oh, no tea either.
I'm just not a hot drinks guy.
Huh.
It's a weird quirk, I know.
Yeah, cold drinks.
Yeah, but I don't drink cold coffee. I don't drink nothing coffee flavored.
Nothing coffee.
It all tastes like dirt. Tea tastes like dirt. Tea's a bag of dirt and water. What do we... If you put enough milk and sugar in it, yeah, maybe it doesn't taste offensive, but then just have a cup of milk and sugar.
Have you talked to the brand manager about this sort of thing when they were branding the show?
I didn't have a lot of say in the show. I was just sort of told this is the concept.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But here we are. I'm going to take a second sip, though, which is not something I normally do. So this is a good sign.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, not awful. Not great,
Not awful.
but not awful. This is progress.
Okay.
Okay, so you're a non-racing family that went to one race ever before you were in one.
And you're a non-coffee drinking family that
In our third
still doesn't
season
like it.
of a coffee show.
Coffee show.
Look, we're walking dichotomies here.
Yes.
So go-karts progress into something else
Dirt
at some
bikes.
point. To dirt
Dirt
bikes.
bikes,
Okay.
dirt bikes,
What?
yes.
Okay. How'd you get there?
Yeah, just we had
Someone didn't pay your dad. And you
right,
got
motorcycles.
Dirt bike.
Right, no, we had a home about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. There's a ski resort there called Seven Springs, and we all grew up there. All the kids up there had mini Hondas, and so the go-kart turned into a mini Honda and Honda 50. A Z50 or a ZR50 or whatever, So we all had those and started with that, and it went from that to an SL100 Honda.
Okay.
And then my sister had a Trail 90, and I had an SL100, and yeah, away we went. And then it went on to 125s and 250s. And then we were sneaking away to races on weekends, with some friends of mine whose older brothers, we were like 12 to 15 years old. And, we had, a friend of mine had an older brother that had his driver's license. So we had their family station wagon with 3 motorcycles on the back. And we were forging notes from our parents to it was okay to race dirt bikes. And we went to a place called Appalachia Lake, West Virginia.
Okay.
With a guy named Dave Coombs, was a famous guy in motorsports, in motorcycles. And we used to go there and race on weekends, and started that, and then it just slowly crept into cars, and started racing cars from there.
So did you have to get rid of the cart to get the bike?
Got rid of the cart to get the bike. Then my mother made my father get rid of the motorcycle because she would always read in the paper, man killed on motorcycle, a red light, and I couldn't convince her that wasn't what I did.
Right.
But she prevailed.
Right.
And
as moms
so
usually do.
I went the motorbike.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you got the first race car?
Well, yeah. Ironically, I spent a winter after I graduated from high school. I graduated in January of my senior year, and I moved to Vail, Colorado. And I parked in this parking lot of a hotel there called the Tivoli Lodge.
Okay.
And I would walk on my way to work every day past the Tivoli Lodge, and there was a guy working on a race car underneath the Tivoli Lodge, and it was Bob Lazier and a guy named Pete Feisman.
Okay.
And I'm down there looking, and it was so cool to have this. He was a Super V champion, then Bob Lazier was, and he flipped me my first copy of Auto Week, I remember, and I remember looking in there, and dirt bikes were $1,000 in those days,
right.
and a Formula Ford was $2,500.
Right.
And so I thought, well, that's not much of a stretch, So I worked hard and over the rest of the winter, and I was fortunate to be racing a Formula Ford by the end of the following end of the year 1977.
What job were you doing in Vail?
I was just working in a ski shop.
Okay.
Yeah, working in a ski shop, a place called the Gondola Ski Shop. It was at the bottom of Gondola Number 1 back in the day, the old Gondola Number 1, when there was only one gondola in Vail. And that was the winter of 75, 76. And my claim to fame at that ski shop was I sold John Denver and his wife ski boots and skis and poles. Yeah. So
not many people can say that.
That was my claim to fame, right? Not many people can say that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you work hard enough to get the car. You start car racing. I kind of want to fast forward a bit because you touched on it. I think it's really interesting. A lot of people, especially if they're newer to the sport, won't realize kind of what being a rookie at Indy was like back then when you were doing it. So what year were you a rookie here?
1982.
82.
Yeah, I graduated from college. I turned 23 and I qualified for the Indianapolis 500, all in a 10-day period in 1982.
What did you take in school?
Finance.
Okay.
Graduated a finance degree from Duquesne University.
Okay. And that's interesting because most people that are smart with money would stay away from buying race cars and going racing.
This is true. Yes.
But you
most people that were smart.
Right.
That's the point there, right?
Right, fair. So how is it different then? Because you talk about having one of the old timers had to be there to watch you and sign off.
Way different then. I think there were 65 car driver combinations here in those days. So you had to. And they were qualifying over 4 days. And they only take 33, but there were 65 cars here.
Wow.
Shooting for 33 spots. So that in itself got your attention,
Yeah.
And so that was number one. Number two, there were 2 weekends of qualifying, not just one, but 2.
Right.
And they filled only the first, I want to say, third of the field or something on the first day, and the second third the second day. But then you had to go into the following weekend if you didn't qualify on the first weekend. You had to wait a whole nother week. Conditions would change, and track would get rubbered up or rained on or whatever, and it was a lot different back then. And it was, the thing that sticks out in my mind, it was a lot more dangerous then.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we lost my Gordon Smiley was 3 cars in front of me in the qualifying line when he crashed in 1982 in turn 3, and Jim Hickman was a Super V driver that was in the race with me, a rookie, and he died the following weekend in Milwaukee. So it was a really different time in terms of safety, and knock on wood, thank God that the powers that be in the sport, focused on ending that
Yeah.
string of events. Yeah.
Was that something in your head when you decided to pivot kind of from the driving side?
It certainly played into your head, yes.
Yeah.
It certainly played into it. I remember I used to give my mother the center of the Indianapolis program.
Okay.
They have their starting lineup.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would frame that every year and sign and say, thanks, Mom, And she had them all lined up in her hallway down the hall from her kitchen. And I remember looking one year from 1982 to 1984, there were 11 of us that had, not us, 11 drivers that either passed away or had leg injuries.
Right. Like career-ending.
By 1984.
Yeah.
And so that weighed on you a little bit. And with your injuries, the leg injuries are no fun. And some of these guys are still carry those injuries with them today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough time in racing.
So was it how many 500 did you do?
Five.
Five?
1982, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay. What, as a driver, was your favorite 500 moment, 500 memory?
Well, certainly was qualifying the first time here in 1982. I was a week out of college. I missed commencement at Duquesne University because I was qualifying here at the Speedway, and I qualified as the fastest rookie. And
what place?
11th. Started 11th in my
Nice.
first Indy 500.
Did you remember your speed?
197.7. And
Not bad.
yeah, and I didn't hold my foot to the floor in turn one the entire month until qualifying, and I did it in qualifying, and I picked up 2.5, 3 miles an hour right away just from that little move, and it really helped us. Yeah.
I remember talking to some guys that drove kind of back in those days, and they would say that. They'd be like, you guys now talk about, Marco's like, I'm flat in turn one, first lap out, right? Not everybody's doing that. Marco likes doing that. But you're comfortably flat in race trim, whatever. I know a lot of guys that said, my first flat laps would be in the race, in qualifying.
In those days, the cars had 47 inches of boost, I think, or 48 inches of boost. And they had close to 1,000 horsepower, but they didn't have the downforce that they have today.
Right.
So it was wing downforce, not tunnel downforce. So they were a little more sketchy to drive, and they weren't nearly, like I said, they weren't nearly as safe. And you could reach out you could almost reach out and touch the front tires with your hands. You can't even reach out of the cars today, and much less touch the front tires. So that's the sport has changed dramatically since then. And more for the better.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you this is a weird question. It's such a weird hypothetical, but does some part of you wish that you had been born in an era that was more like today in terms of safety, and maybe you'd hung on to driving a bit longer?
Yeah, I don't know. I never deal with hypotheticals unless they're, I don't know. Sure.
Yeah.
Who knows? I'll make up an answer. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I don't.
There's a lot of factors that go into that decision.
Right, a lot
so
of factors. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was happy. I was happy born when I was born, and I'm happy to be in the era that I was in.
Yeah.
I had some great mentors along the way. Like I said, Parnelli and Mario, and I knew the Whittington brothers, and I knew Danny Ungaius, and these were all guys, and people got to work with people like Jim McGee, and a guy named Mark Bridges, and a guy named Max Luther from Columbus, Indiana. Some great guys that were big pivotal guys in my career, and I was just fortunate to take a little bit from each one of those, and those guys and hundreds more that touch your career have their fingerprints on the team that exists today here at Chip Ganassi Racing.
Yeah.
Those guys all have their fingerprints on it.
It's cool, man. Even just seeing you talk about those guys, thinking back, I see the smile on your face as you talk about it. I mean, you can tell the passion is so deep with you about this sport. So we talked about your favorite moment as a driver of the 500. How about, can you pick one favorite moment as a team owner here?
I don't know. It's probably our next win will be my next favorite one. Yeah. I don't know. I have lots of big moments as a team owner. I mean, I don't know. you know, obviously winning the race.
The first win's got to be pretty cool.
I mean, they were there. Yeah, you know, they all are just, you know, they're all so surreal. You know, you work so hard to win this race, and you know, but they say the track picks the winner, and you know, I've never believed that, but I can tell you this: the older I get, the more I believe that. And so I don't know. It's this place is filled with so much, like I said earlier, history and tradition and intrigue, and yeah, it's just it's great. You know, it's you know, they say baseball is the harbinger of spring, but I think it's the Indianapolis 500.
Was Montoya your first win here?
Yes. Well, we won with Emerson Fittipaldi in 1989.
Okay.
I owned Patrick Racing at that time.
Right.
And you know, people thought I was a partner or something. I owned the team in its entirety in 1989. And ironically, I just saw Emerson this morning at the in the gym at the JW Marriott, and we were talking about that. What a magical time it was. So yeah, we won in 1989, and then won in 2000 under Chip Ganassi Racing.
Right.
With Montoya, and you know, from there it was just onward and upward every year.
I got a funny story for you, because that race helped me as a kid really understand the size of this race.
Yes.
Because Montoya wins, and you got on the radio, and I don't know if you remember what you said to him. Do you remember what you said to him?
I think I said, "You're the greatest driver in the world," or
you
something.
You said, "You're the most famous racing
Right,
driver in the world right now."
Right.
And that's when it really hit me. I'm like, man, that's so true.
Right,
This
right.
Everyone in the motorsports world is watching this
Somebody
race
knows
on this
who
day.
that was, right.
And everybody knew who won that race, and
Right.
that's the moment for me that I really hit it. It was
Right.
your words.
Right,
So
right.
you helped create my
Well, thank
appreciation.
you. That's nice
for
to
this
hear.
place.
Yeah, it's true. You know, so oftentimes in this sport, you know, words come out of your mouth sometimes, and you say to yourself, "Did I just say that?" You know, and that was sure.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments, and you know, Juan was such a great guy to work with in his heyday. I mean, he was blindingly fast in anything he got into, and just, you know, some great stories about him in those days.
Is there a driver that you never got the chance to work with that you wish you had? Is there one kind of on the list, that the one that got away?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think, you know, I thought, you know, we brought Kyle Larson into NASCAR, and he unfortunately had to leave the team. You know, I would have liked to brought him here.
Right.
And but someone else got to do that,
Yeah.
so good for them. But yeah, I mean, just you know, I think there are lots of guys who can, you know, who can make the transition, but you have so few that I think could win it. There was a guy one time we were talking to that, you know, we never got a chance to work together. It was, his name was James, what was the guy's name?
Never heard of him.
He started with an H.
Jack Harvey? Is that
No.
James. J.R. Hildebrand?
No, not Hildebrand. No.
It'll come to you. Yeah, it'll come to you. Anyway, man, we've gone way over time and way off topic, but I've just loved getting a chat to you. So really appreciate you coming by.
Great to be here, my man.
Thanks for spending your birthday with us.
Thank you. I hope you liked your coffee.
I liked it the best that I've liked one so far.
Thanks.
Cheers, Jim.
Okay.